Hello, everyone. Welcome to another great episode of Royal Black and Elite. I'm Lady TrenettWilson, your lecturer and social historian. Now, we have to have this discussion today because so many times when I talk about Black people who were royal and elite in history, I call them Black, and I get comments down below. People say, oh, he's mixed race, so you need to call them Black and white. And so I thought this would be a great conversation to have and a lecture to have because I think some people don't really understand the history and why I call them black because the world calls them black, and even it was codified in law and something called the one drop rule. And that wasn't even done away with until our lifetime. So I think this will be a great lecture, and you'll find out a little bit more about why we're so segmented into these racial classifications when really we'll find that many of us, in fact pretty much all of us, are mixed with something. So we're more alike than different, and I really wish that we could get along and come together in a more cohesive way within our country, but I think it really started here. And so let's have this conversation. So let's go back. So when the Civil War ended in 1865, the racial climate was horrible, right? You had the South who wanted slavery, you had the North who didn't. And despite how many in the South felt, the people who enslaved the African people, in particular the men, would assault the Black women. And this would result in children. Now, these children would often be, of course, mixed race, and they would be what they call the house slaves because their father was usually the slave master. Now, there were occasions, in many occasions, actually, they sent their children off to England, or they left money for them to be educated along with the mother. And then even some of them moved the children right in the house with his wife and his white wife and other children. So that's kind of the climate that was going on during that time. Now, before this law came into place and before the Civil War ended, these mixed race people who were free, so he had to have manumitted this child because if she was born to a black mother, she would automatically, or he would automatically be considered a slave. But if their father manumitted them and they were mixed race, they were legally classified as white people. Now, they had to have less than 1/8, according to Virginia, or in Virginia, 1/4 of African ancestry. So nationally, 1/8, but in Virginia, 1/4. So that would be a grandmother or great great grandmother. So though society may have viewed them differently based on their appearance because they look black, you cannot deny a mixed race person. They're going to have a little bit of curlier hair. They're going to be built better than, just normally a normal, European. And they're going to have some shade to their skin. But no matter what, they were legally classified as white. Now, why is this? Because the slave master knew if they were classified as black, they would have a hard road to toe, especially in the 1860s. And so they didn't want their children to go through all of that. So they legally classified them as white, which meant they could vote, which meant they could buy land, which meant they could marry, all kinds of things when they were classified as white. So that's why they did it. Now, an example of this is Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson had many children with a black woman named Sally Hemings, who was also mixed herself. Now, Sally, oddly enough, was Thomas Jefferson. His wife was named Martha. Sally was her half sister. So they kept it in the family. So it was just treacherous work back then. They had 6 children together, but 4 of them grew up to be adults, and 3 of them lived their life in society as white people. And that's why it took some time for them to, find out that who Sally Hemings were and that they were descendants of of a black woman. And you mix enough. So say you have a black person and a white person who have a child. So that person is going to come out light skinned or fair skinned. Well, if that person has get married and have a person who's white, then their child is going to come out even whiter. By the time they have a child and they get married to a white person, that black lineage will be completely disappeared. You won't see, maybe you'll see a little curl around the edges, but that is about it. And so that's why they were able to go and pass as white people. So this is what was taking place back in that time. And there was such an intrinsic hate of the dark skin because they were treated so badly. And so that's why people would try to run away from it. But blackness had not really been defined by law. But that changed in 1910. And why did it? Because before then, they didn't want to do it because half the kids were the white master slave owners. So they didn't really want to define what blackness was. So at first, they said, okay, in 1822, Virginia, a law stated to be defined as a mulatto, that's what they used to call the mixed people back then, mulatto, a person had to be 1/4 African ancestry. So that's equivalent to one grandparent, which stayed in place until 1910. Then they changed it to the 1/16th. So, I mean, they was getting down to the last compound. And then they changed it all together in 1910. Now, so here you have, now they're saying if you have one drop of blood, and it was enacted. So for 20 years, they played with it a little bit. They were changing laws. They were saying 1/16th, 1/10th, 1/8th, one. And then they finally got down to it in 1930 and said, if you have one drop of African ancestry in your blood at all, you will be classified as black. When you look at these people, their mamas were black. So they were more than one drop. So that's the reason I call them black, because that was the one drop rule. Now, it reported that they didn't enact the law before, of course, because of these slave owners. And the one drop rule is tied to the segregation and Jim Crow and the vestiges of slavery. Do you know 17 states enacted this law, including Texas? And you know about Texas. I left a video down below about Juneteenth and how we found out late that we were free. So it was then in the 1930s that the census stopped using the term mulatto. You had to be black or you had to be white. And they put everyone in these silos of race, when if you were mixed, or if you had to have an Hispanic person in your family, or a European person in your family, an Asian person in your family, then they didn't really quite fit in these boxes of black or white. And so this one drop rule caused a lot of consternation for a lot of people, and it hurt people too, because if the world perceived black people in a negative light, then they would perceive you even on paper as negatively. So they closed doors for them. And that's why they wanted to be classified as white. You know what, though, interesting genealogist Henry Louis Gates Jr., he published a series on PBS called The African American Lives. And they did something like group DNAs, and they did this research to kind of find out really where do we come from. So let me break it down to you. 58% of black people have 12.5% of European ancestry. That means at least one great grandparent was a European. So 58%. So more than half of black people walking around here with some white ancestry in their background. 19.6% of them have at least 25% or one grandparent who is white or European. 1% or have 50% who are mixed, and 5% have or of black people have 12.5 Native American, which is great grand. So 19%, 1%, and 5%. We're all mixed with something, y'all. We all are. But I will say only 5% of black people are mixed, with 12.5 of Indian or Native American. So all them people walking around talking about my grandmother was Indian, that's why my hair is the way it is. It's not true. Very, very few of us are mixed with Indian. There's more of us mixed with European. And Of course, because what was happening during slavery, as I explained in the beginning. So that's where all of the one drop rule came about. And that's why I call people black, because they are black. The world perceives them as black, and they paperwork say they black most of the time. There is no place on there to put mixed on any type of senses or any type of anything. So that's why I thought it was important to have this discussion and explain the language around this. Now, this is how I feel. I'm with Dr. Martin Luther King. You need to, you really understand people and treat people based on the content of their character and not the color of their skin. I don't care if you black, green, purple, or red. You can be either good or bad. And if we put our guard down based upon race versus based upon character, I think we do ourselves a disservice. Tell me what you think down below. What do you know about the one drop rule? Do you have any African ancestry? Or are you one of those 19.6% who have 25% of Anglo in you? Very interesting conversation. Y'all keep it going down below and keep learning about some more Black history right here. Click right there. It is right there. Click right there, and you can continue to learn about more of the Royal, Black, and Elite. I want to thank you all for joining me. And remember, my lectures are for entertainment and educational purposes only, and the Fair Act use is in effect. Now, thank you all for joining me, and I'll see you on another great episode.